My name is Cora, and I am 34 years old. For my entire life, my family has had a nickname for me, a little joke they'd trot out at holiday dinners and family gatherings. They called me the Poor One. It was a term of endearment, they claimed, a playful nod to my quiet life as a rare book archivist, my 10-year-old sedan, and my small, mortgage-free bungalow that I'd bought with my own savings. It was a stark contrast to my brother Ethan's life, the celebrated art gallery owner with a leased German sports car and a downtown loft subsidized by our parents. I had learned to wear the nickname like a comfortable, if slightly itchy sweater. Then came the day of the reckoning, the day my father's ambition finally outstripped his resources. I sat in a sterile glass-walled conference room, watching the life drain from my father's face as his lawyer explained the magnitude of his financial ruin. A catastrophic investment, a personal guarantee, a debt of $1.2 million due in 72 hours. He looked at my brother, the golden child, for a solution. He looked at my mother, his partner in building their empire of appearances. He never once looked at me. He didn't have to. I was the poor one, a spectator to the real drama. What he didn't know was that while he had been building an image, I had been building an empire. If you have ever felt completely underestimated by the people who should know you best, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join a community who understands that the quietest people often have the most surprising stories. My life to an outsider would have seemed utterly unremarkable. I spent my days in the hushed, climate-controlled archives of the city university, surrounded by the scent of aging paper and leather. My work was meticulous and slow, restoring and cataloging centuries-old books and manuscripts. It was a career that offered little in the way of glamour or high salaries, but it was my passion. It was real, tangible work that would outlast trends and stock market fluctuations. I lived a life of deliberate frugality. My bungalow was small, but every piece of furniture was something I had found and lovingly restored. My clothes were from consignment shops, my vacations were camping trips, and my one luxury was a high-quality espresso machine. This lifestyle wasn't born of necessity, but of principle. A principle instilled in me by the one family member who had ever truly seen me, my grandfather, Arthur. While my father, Robert, a retired investment banker, worshipped at the altar of conspicuous consumption, his own father had been a quiet and methodical carpenter who believed in the power of slow, steady growth. When my grandfather passed away 10 years ago, he left my brother and I equal shares of his modest estate. Ethan, with my father's encouragement, immediately used his $250,000 to launch his first art gallery. I, following my grandfather's handwritten instructions in the letter that accompanied the check, quietly invested mine in a diversified portfolio of low-risk index funds and blue-chip stocks. Don't build a life to impress others, Cora Bean. His letter had read, "Build a life that gives you freedom. Let your money work for you in the background while you do the work you love in the foreground." I took his advice to heart. For 10 years, I lived on my archivist's salary and never touched the inheritance, allowing it to grow, compound, and multiply in the quiet corners of the stock market. I tracked it meticulously, learning everything I could about investing, turning my grandfather's seed money into a formidable and completely secret fortune. My family, meanwhile, operated in the different universe. My father, even in retirement, was obsessed with maintaining the image of wealth. He and my mother, Margaret, lived in a sprawling mansion in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. They were members of every prestigious club and sat on the boards of every fashionable charity. Their lives were a performance, and my brother Ethan was their star production. His art gallery was a financial black hole, a vanity project that hemorrhaged money.
Yet my parents propped it up, pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into it to maintain the illusion of his success. At every family dinner, the conversation was a performance of its own. "Ethan just sold a piece to a major collector," my father would boom, conveniently omitting that the collector was one of his old golf buddies whom he had strong-armed into the purchase. "Cora is still enjoying her little books," my mother would add with a tight smile, turning to me. "It's so nice you have a hobby that pays the bills, dear." The label of the poor one was reinforced at every turn. For my 30th birthday, Ethan received a brand new Audi, a necessity for his image, my father had explained. I received a gift certificate to a sensible shoe store. At Christmas, he was given a ski vacation to Aspen. I was given a subscription to a magazine about historical preservation. The disparity was so ingrained, so normal, that I had stopped feeling the sting. It was just the weather in my family's climate. I was the low-pressure system, and Ethan was the glittering, unpredictable hurricane that commanded all the attention. The crisis began with a project my father had called his legacy. It was a luxury condominium development on the waterfront. He had come out of retirement to partner with a younger, flashier developer, personally guaranteeing the loans to get the project off the ground. It was supposed to be his final, triumphant masterpiece, a monument to his financial acumen. For months, it was all he talked about. He would unroll blueprints across the dining room table, pointing out the infinity pool and the Italian marble countertops. "This, Ethan, is how you build an empire," he would say, completely ignoring my presence. "You have to take big risks to get big rewards." I, with my quiet, risk-averse investment strategy, saw the red flags from a mile away. The developer he partnered with had a string of bankruptcies in his past. The market was showing signs of a downturn. My father's personal guarantee was a catastrophic mistake, but I knew better to voice my concerns. In our family, my financial opinion was worth less than the paper napkins we used for dinner. Then the inevitable happened. The developer declared bankruptcy and fled the country, leaving my father holding the bag. The bank called in the loan. The final, non-negotiable bill was $1.2 million, due in 3 days, or they would begin seizing all of his assets. The mansion, the investment accounts, everything. Which brought us to this conference room. The family lawyer, a man named Sterling, who looked as grim as a pallbearer, had just finished laying out the stark, brutal facts. My mother was weeping silently into a silk handkerchief. My father sat rigid, his face the color of ash. Ethan was staring at his phone, his thumb mindlessly scrolling, a nervous tic I'd recognized from his childhood. "The only viable option is to liquidate assets," Mr. Sterling said, his voice flat. "Robert, we'll have to sell the house immediately. Margaret, the jewelry, the art, it all has to go." My father finally spoke, his voice a hoarse whisper. "There has to be another way." He turned to Ethan, his eyes pleading. "Your gallery, the paintings, what are they worth?" Ethan looked up from his phone, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple.
"Dad, the gallery is leveraged. I owe the artists, the suppliers. Most of the valuable pieces are on consignment. I don't actually own them. I have maybe 50,000 in assets if I'm lucky." The confession hung in the air, a small, pathetic cracker in the aftermath of a nuclear bomb. For the first time, my father looked at his son not with pride, but with a dawning, horrified understanding. "You mean, after all the money we've given you, you have nothing?" "I have a brand," Ethan said defensively. "The gallery has a reputation." "A reputation doesn't pay $1 million debt."
My father roared, slamming his fist on the polished mahogany table. The performance was over. The carefully constructed facade of their success was crumbling before my eyes. They argued then, a torrent of bitter, long-suppressed recriminations. My father accused Ethan of being a spoiled, incompetent failure. Ethan accused my father of pushing him into a business he never truly understood. My mother just wept, her sobs the only soundtrack to their implosion. Through it all, I sat in silence. No one looked at me. No one asked for my opinion. In this moment of ultimate crisis, I was so completely irrelevant that I might as well have been a ghost. They had forgotten I was even in the room. It was that final profound act of dismissal that solidified my resolve. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat, interrupting the family drama. "Robert, we need a decision. I need to call the bank by the end of the day. Do I tell them you are preparing to liquidate?" My father buried his face in his hands, a broken man. My mother was inconsolable. Ethan was staring out the window, defeated. This was it, the moment I had both dreaded and, on some deep, unacknowledged level, preparing for. I opened my purse and took out a simple, leather-bound checkbook. The account was not from a well-known national bank, but from a small private credit union in another state, the one my grandfather had used. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. Everyone turned to look at me, their expressions a mixture of surprise and annoyance, as if the furniture had suddenly spoken. "Mr. Sterling, what are the bank's wire transfer details?" He looked at me confused. "Cora, I don't think you understand the scale of the problem," my father said, his voice thick with condescending pity. "This isn't about your rainy day fund." "I understand perfectly," I replied, my gaze level with his. "I can cover the bill." The room fell silent again, but this time it was a silence of pure, unadulterated shock. My brother actually let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "Cover it?" he scoffed. "Cora, this is $1.2 million, not $1,200. Did you hit the lottery?" "Something like that," I said, turning my attention back to the lawyer. "The wire details, please." Still looking bewildered, Mr. Sterling wrote down an account number and routing number on a piece of paper and slid it across the table. I took out my phone, opened my banking app, and with a few quiet taps, initiated the transfer. My fingers were perfectly steady. "There," I said, placing my phone face up on the table. "The full amount, $1.2 million, has been transferred to the account you specified. You should receive a confirmation within the hour." I stood up and gathered my purse. "I believe our family business is concluded." I looked at the 3 stunned faces staring back at me. My father, his mouth agape, my mother, her tears frozen on her cheeks, and Ethan, his smug expression replaced by a look of slack-jawed disbelief. "I'll send you the terms of the loan tomorrow," I added, as an afterthought. Then I turned and walked out of the conference room, leaving them in the ruins of their old world, a world where I was, and would be forever no longer, the poor one.
The ride home from the lawyer's office was the longest, quietest car ride of my life. My parents sat in the back of the town car my father had hired for the occasion, a final performance of wealth he couldn't afford. I sat in the front, staring out at the passing city. The silence in the car was a physical weight. No one knew what to say. The entire architecture of our family, built on the foundation of my brother's perceived success and my perceived insignificance, had been demolished in the space of 5 minutes. When we arrived at their mansion, I declined their hesitant invitation to come inside. "I have to get back," I said, my voice neutral. "But we need to talk about this, Cora," my mother pleaded, her hand on my arm. Her touch felt foreign. "I told you," I replied, gently removing her hand. "I will send you the terms tomorrow." I got in my own old reliable sedan and drove away, watching their lost, confused figures shrink in my rearview mirror. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt a strange,
quiet sense of order being restored, as if a misaligned bone had finally been set back into place. The document I sent the next day was not a proposal. It was a declaration. I had spent the night consulting with my own lawyer, a sharp, pragmatic woman named Sarah Polson, who had helped me with my grandfather's estate. Together, we had drafted a binding loan agreement. I wasn't giving them the money. I was saving their assets, and in return, I was taking control. The terms were simple and non-negotiable. 1. The $1.2 million was a formal loan secured by their mansion as collateral. They would make monthly, interest-only payments to me for the next 10 years, at which point the principal would be due. The interest rate was a nominal 1%, just enough to make it legally sound. This wasn't about profit. It was about accountability. 2. Ethan's art gallery was to be dissolved. He would sell off all remaining assets, and the proceeds would be used to pay off his substantial debts. He was to find actual, paying employment within 90 days. I would not have my loan used to continue funding his vanity project. 3. My father, Robert, was to give me full power of attorney over his remaining finances. I would oversee all his investments and expenditures until the loan was repaid. He had proven himself a reckless gambler with their future. I was now the house. 4. They would all attend family financial counseling with a therapist of my choosing. The cycle of enabling and financial irresponsibility was over. I emailed the document to them and to Mr. Sterling. The response was immediate and explosive. My father called, roaring with indignation. "This is an insult! Power of attorney? You want to control my money after you've already humiliated me?" "I haven't humiliated you, Dad," I said calmly. "Your own decisions did that. I am protecting my investment and, frankly, protecting you from yourself." My mother called, sobbing. "How can you do this to your brother? His gallery is his dream. You're destroying his life." "His dream was built on your retirement savings, Mom," I replied. "I am forcing him to face reality, something you and Dad have shielded him from his entire life." Ethan sent a single petulant text. "I can't believe you're doing this. I thought you were my sister." I didn't reply. They fought it for a week. They consulted their lawyer, who undoubtedly told them they had no choice. I was their only creditor. I held all the cards. To refuse my terms would be to lose everything anyway, only this time through a messy public bankruptcy instead of a quiet, private restructuring. One by one, they capitulated. The signed documents arrived by courier a week later. The first therapy session was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Ethan began the process of closing his gallery. A new era had begun. The therapy sessions were excruciating. The therapist, a calm, insightful man named Dr. Miles, was masterful at cutting through their years of self-delusion. In our first session, he asked each of us to describe our role in the family.
"I'm the patriarch, the provider," my father said, his voice still holding a trace of its old authority. "I'm the heart of the family, the peacemaker," my mother said. "I'm the creative one, the visionary," Ethan said. Dr. Miles then turned to me. "And you, Cora?" "I'm the poor one," I said softly. The words hung in the room, heavy with unspoken history. For the first time, forced by a neutral third party, they had to confront the narrative they had created for me. "Why do you call her that?" Dr. Miles asked my father. "Oh, it's just a joke," he said with a dismissive laugh. "A term of endearment. She's always been so simple in her needs." "Do you find it endearing, Cora?" Dr. Miles asked, his gaze fixed on me. "No," I said, looking directly at my father. "I find it diminishing." The work was slow and painful.
Decades of ingrained patterns don't unravel in a day. But for the first time, the patterns were being acknowledged. Ethan, stripped of his gallery and his parents' financial cushion, was forced to confront the world as an ordinary person. He took a job at a high-end furniture store, a humbling experience for a man who had once considered himself a titan of the art world. He was surprisingly good at it. His charm, once used to manipulate his parents, was now used to sell sofas to wealthy clients. He started paying his own rent. He learned to budget. My father chafed under my financial oversight. Our monthly budget meetings were tense. He fought me on every line item, from his country club dues to the brand of wine he bought. "This is ridiculous. I am a grown man. You can't tell me how to spend my own money," he would shout. "It's not your money, Dad," I would remind him calmly, pointing to the loan agreement. "It's mine until you've paid me back. This is what financial accountability looks like." Slowly, reluctantly, he began to change. He started making more considered financial decisions. Not out of a change of heart, perhaps, but out of necessity. My life, meanwhile, continued its quiet, upward trajectory. The story of what happened had, of course, leaked out into their social circle. The narrative, however, was not of my cruelty, but of my father's folly and my unexpected competence. I was no longer seen as the dowdy, irrelevant daughter, but as a shrewd, powerful woman who had saved her family from ruin. It was a reputation I had never sought, but it was a significant improvement. I continued my work at the archives, finding solace in the quiet, methodical nature of my job. But I also began to allow myself some of the freedoms my wealth afforded. I traded in my old sedan for a safe new electric car. I hired a landscape architect to turn my small backyard into a beautiful low-maintenance English garden. And I started traveling, taking long weekends to visit small historic towns with libraries I had always dreamed of seeing.
The most significant change was my relationship with Ethan. Without the distorting lens of parental favoritism between us, we began to build a new, more honest connection. He would call me for advice, not about money, but about his job, about navigating office politics, about learning to live as a self-sufficient adult. It's hard. He confessed one night over the phone, his voice raw with a humility I'd never heard from him before. I never realized how much they buffered me from everything. "I don't know how you did it all on your own for so long." "You learn to be resourceful when you have no other choice," I told him. "Welcome to the club." For his birthday, I didn't buy him an expensive gift. I gave him a copy of my grandfather's favorite book on personal finance, with a replica of the letter Arthur had written to me tucked inside. 2 weeks later, he called to tell me he had opened his first retirement account. A year after the crisis, my father called me. His voice was different, quieter, stripped of its usual bravado. "The board of the community foundation called me today," he said. "They want to offer me a position on their finance committee, as a volunteer." I waited, unsure where this was going. They said they had heard I had a very shrewd financial mind in my family guiding me, and they thought my experience could be valuable. He paused. "I told them that my daughter was the real financial expert, and I recommended you for the position instead." The gesture was so unexpected, so completely out of character, that I was momentarily speechless. "They want to meet with you next week," he added. "I think you should do it. You'd be great." It wasn't an apology, not in words, but it was an act of deference, of respect.
It was an acknowledgement, finally, that my skills had value, that I was more than just the poor one. It was the beginning of a different kind of wealth for our family, one not measured in dollars, but in a hard-won and long overdue sense of respect. The final piece of the old world fell away on a crisp autumn afternoon nearly 2 years after the conference room showdown. I was at my parents' house for our now regular Sunday dinner. The mansion had been sold. They now lived in a tasteful, much smaller townhouse that was financially manageable. The atmosphere was lighter, the air less thick with the pressure of keeping up appearances. Ethan was there with his new girlfriend, a sensible kindergarten teacher named Chloe, who seemed completely unimpressed by his family's former status. He was now the assistant manager of the furniture store and was, for the first time in his life, genuinely proud of a promotion he had earned himself. My mother was showing me a photo album from their recent trip to the coast, a modest vacation they had paid for with their own budgeted savings. My father was discussing a book about market history with me, asking for my opinion with genuine interest. In the middle of dinner, my father cleared his throat and stood up holding a glass of water. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, his eyes finding mine across the table. "For many years, I measured our family's success by the wrong metrics. I valued image over substance, risk over prudence. I created roles for my children that were unfair and damaging." He looked at Ethan. "I failed you by not preparing you for the real world." Then he looked at me, and his voice cracked slightly. "And I failed you by not seeing the incredible, capable woman you were becoming right in front of my eyes. I owe my home, my stability, and my newfound peace of mind to the daughter I so foolishly underestimated." He raised his glass. "To Cora, the richest person I know." Tears welled in my eyes as my mother, my brother, and his girlfriend all raised their glasses. It wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about being seen. I thought of my grandfather Arthur's letter, "Build a life that gives you freedom." I had done that, and in a strange, unexpected way, by saving my family, I had given them a chance to do the same. They were free from the crushing weight of their own pretense. After dinner, as I was leaving, my father walked me to my car. "The final payment on the loan will be transferred tomorrow," he said quietly. "You'll be paid in full." "I know," I replied. "Thank you for everything, Cora," he said, finally, using the words. "Not just for the money, for the lesson. It was a hard one to learn at my age." "It was a hard one for me to teach," I admitted. We stood in a comfortable silence for a moment. "You know, the Community Foundation is still looking for someone to chair their finance committee," he said with a small smile. "I think I might be finally qualified." As I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, I felt a sense of closure that had nothing to do with the $1.2 million that would be back in my account tomorrow. I had received a different kind of repayment. The family that once called me the poor one now saw my true worth. And more importantly, I had finally, fully claimed it for myself. My wealth was no longer a secret. It was a tool, a resource, but it wasn't my identity. My identity was the woman who had built her own life, saved her family on her own terms, and had learned that the most valuable asset you can ever have is a quiet, unshakable sense of your own worth.
Have you ever had to step up and take control in a family crisis, shattering the role you were always expected to play? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If the story resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to hear more stories about changing family dynamics. Remember, your value isn't determined by the labels people give you, but by the life you have the courage to build for yourself. Thank you for listening, and may you always have the wisdom to know your own worth.